Hello everyone, and Happy New Year, as we are literally just a few days away from Rosh Hashanah, which is coming Sunday night, 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. As you may know, Rosh Hashanah in Hebrew doesn't mean the beginning of the year, it means the head of the year. And that's a very precise word, the word Rosh in Hebrew. As a matter of fact, the entire month of Tishrei, which is the Hebrew name for the coming month, the new year, is also the letters, if you reverse the letters Tishrei, it's also the words Rashis, Resh, head. So it's an interesting choice for a word where you don't just say a new year, you say head of the year. A head is far more than the beginning, as we shall be discussing. So hence the title, as a pre-Rosh Hashanah workshop, the first Rosh Hashanah, where it all began. Scientists, especially of late, are consumed with the search for the Big Bang, of the evidence of some residue, of some impression left from that first moment that they consider to be where it all began. Why is this so important? Because by understanding where things originate from, we can understand how they evolve, how they got where they are, and where we're going into the future, which is really an axiom around all cycles and all issues and all anything really, any activity is, as they say, as the head goes, so does the body follow. Now, the original concept really comes from Rosh Hashanah, because Rosh Hashanah, as I said, is not just the beginning of the year, it's the head of the year. As we know, a head, a mind, is the central nervous system, the control center, that controls and guides and directs the entire body. Besides it being one of the organs, one of the limbs, one of the parts of the body, it's more than that, is also the captain of the ship. So, in a fascinating way, the way Judaism looks at things, time too has a beginning and an end and a head. So we think in terms of a head, the head of a body, head of an animal, the head of a company. But time also has a head, and that's every year on Rosh Hashanah is the renewal of the central nervous system that will dictate and will define and shape and inform all the days of the year. So, just as the mind and the brain and the head encompass the entire body, in a sense, in other words, and control it, so too Rosh Hashanah has that concentrated power. So what happens on Rosh Hashanah isn't just a day experience, it actually can help shape your entire year, which is why we take it seriously. We don't see it just as another day of prayer. And Yom Kippur actually is called in some places actually Rosh Hashanah as well, because Yom Kippur is essentially the conclusion of the Rosh Hashanah process. So it's the 10 days with punctuated by Rosh Hashanah at the beginning, it's 10 days of Tshuva, and Yom Kippur at the end. But Rosh Hashanah, of course, is where it begins, the new moon, new year, not just as a euphemism, as we say, the new year. For example, January 1st, nothing happens. Not on the cosmic level and not on the practical level, except it's a date that was chosen. It could have been January 2nd. Could have been February 1st. Whereas in Rosh Hashanah, as the Arizal puts so poetically, the universe goes into a comatose state with waiting and anticipation for its renewal and its reawakening and the renewal of its contract, which recreates the exact moment of what happened at the Big Bang, at creation, the genesis of it all. Adam and Eve were placed in the Garden of Eden. This is considered the culmination of the creation, and actually Zeh Yom, this is considered the beginning of creation, even though it's the sixth day based on the Bible, but it is the day that it was concluded, that process. And every year, that's Rosh Hashanah, that Friday, when Adam and Eve were created, that's Friday is the first Rosh Hashanah, and then ever since we not just replay it, but that energy, as I've discussed many times, time is like a spiral, so that energy repeats itself every year during that period of time. Just like during our birthdays, the same energy that was there when we first were born repeats itself every year that way, obviously on a different axis and a different angle. The same is here regarding Rosh Hashanah, the collective birthday of the human race. So when you think of it that way, Rosh Hashanah is a day filled with opportunity to actually shape and define our year. So of course I begin with that blessing, as I said. That's why we bless each other for a good year, because Rosh Hashanah, if you have a healthy head, the rest of the body will follow. If we do what we have to do on this special day, we then set the tone and set the pace for the rest of the year. So everyone should have a very a sweet and healthy year, all in good health, blessings in parnasa, livelihood, in nachas, and joy from ourselves, from our children, those of us from our grandchildren, all in abundance, materially, spiritually, and everything else that goes in between. And on Yom Kippur, one of the prayers, we actually say a prayer that goes from A to Z in the Hebrew alphabet, from Aleph to Taf, that covers everything, every possible blessing that we can imagine. So that's my blessing to all of you and everyone everywhere. Now the question is, what can we do to maximize the channels? The blessings will come, the power of this potent day, Rosh Hashanah, the Big Bang, as I said, where it all began. And actually, you could just rephrase it really, how do we analyze, how do we understand the mysteries of this mind of time, the central nervous system, the head, Rosh Hashanah of time? And by understanding the power of that of course allows us to tap into that energy, and in turn help it shape, as I said, the rest of the days of the year. So think of the days of the year as the limbs and the organs of time, and Rosh Hashanah being the central nervous system, the head, the mind, the brain. And as I said, everything begins with the brain. The brain sends signals to the rest of the entire body. So Rosh Hashanah does send signals as well. So understanding that mind is a critical component to understanding what we can do as we look at our lives. Now, what's one of the big challenges in life is, in one word, monotony. Monotony, boredom, where we get trapped in routines and patterns, into all types of habits, good or bad, that begin to become a life of their own. They become a vicious cycle of its own. It's like, in the good old days when we used to have the LPs and records, remember? And the record got scratched and the needle would just go, and it was just, unless you went and shifted something, just go around and around and around, you hear the same noise again and again and again. A little beautiful piece of music suddenly becomes an irritating force, of irritating sound, until you shift it. Now we all have similar experiences, and it can be just as irritating. You may not feel it, but others feel it. Because you hear, let's say, a person who's always whining and complaining, and that becomes their habit. Who wants to hear somebody always complaining? Or other types of routines and habits and patterns that we get trapped into. For many reasons. One of the reasons is you don't do anything about something, then it slowly begins to grow on you, and then you can't get out of it. Which is the essence of every addiction and every routine. It begins once, twice, but it's always a symptom of something missing. And it's often the boredom or the monotony or the lack of passion in a person's life is a breeding ground for unhealthy addictions, unhealthy routines and habits. And once the habit becomes a habit, now you have a secondary problem. Not just the original lack of passion, now you got yourself stuck in a place that you can't get out of. And you turn to it whenever you need relief. And whenever you need some comfort, you turn to these dependencies. Now, not all of them necessarily are unhealthy completely. Some are. But one thing for sure, they control your life, which is the definition of addiction. Who's the master and who's the slave? If behavior patterns and different things you turn to become your master, which means you cannot stop it, then it's controlling you instead of you controlling it. Which, of course, we all understand what that means, and no one likes to hear that because it's very demoralizing, actually, to hear that you're controlled by your habits. But that's what happens. So the mere concept of Rosh Hashanah, the idea of renewal, that there's a point in time where it all begins anew, in itself is already a redemption. The mere fact of knowing that you could start anew and clean the slate, this Sunday evening, gives a person a certain element of hope. It's like saying, imagine you get yourself in a pattern, a routine, a habit, addiction, and then once a year a train will come by that you can get on and get out of this place. And then that day, for whatever reason, you get distracted and you miss the train. It's a sad thing, but here we have the opportunity to know you can get on a new train, you can get on a new path. And not just by your effort alone. If your effort alone, you could say, listen, I'm already weak, I'm already trapped. But here's an energy that enters into existence that is unprecedented. In the words of the Balatanya, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, Or Chodesh U'Mechudesh, a completely new energy and light enters into existence. There was never such a light. There was never such an energy before in all of history. Not in the time of Abraham, not in the time of Garden of Eden, not in the time of Abraham, not in the time of Moses, not in the time of the temple. Right here in 2015, this Sunday night, Monday and Tuesday, Rosh Hashanah Tafshin, I involved in the Hebrew calendar, 5776, an unprecedented energy that no one ever saw or experienced. And all the generations will have ever seen such a light and energy. Now you could say, well, how come no one of us see it? How come the world isn't ready? Why will it not dominate headlines? Because as always, great energy all energy is invisible. Because energy is not visible to the naked eye. We're caught up, that's part of our traps. We're caught up with the here and now, seduced by the senses that dominate our lives, what we see, what we hear, what we taste, touch, and smell, which in turn takes control of our imagination and our thoughts. And that's our lives. Our lives are consumed by these forces that are the immediate here and now, instant gratification. So if a person is completely distracted and busy with their little needs, so obviously that myopic vision will not allow them to sense the energy that enters. You have to be present and be receptive. Just like, think of it like beautiful music being played, but you have so many loud sounds and turbulence in your life, you can't hear the fine tunes of a gentle violin. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Bell experiment. So Joshua Bell, great violinist, tried an experiment. He sat himself down with his Stradivarius, which is a very rare and very expensive and special handmade violin, in Washington Central train station, Washington, D.C. We're similar to Grand Central Station here. Thousands of people commute every morning, every evening. So this was in the morning. He sat himself down on a box with his violin, began to play the most exquisite music that if you had to go pay tickets, it would be expensive tickets. But here he was playing it all for free, seemingly some panhandler sitting on a box in the train station. And it was all recorded, videotaped, how people just rush by, don't even notice it. For over an hour. Not one person noticed it. And all those people, had you tell them, here's free tickets to Lincoln Center or wherever, Carnegie Hall, to hear this, they would grab it. They'd even pay for it. Finally, one child, going with his mother, senses it and stops. Is mesmerized by it. But then the mother grabs the child and yanks him away, and the child wants to continue listening. The child, the story with Emperor with no clothes, the child senses something special. Of course, the experiment was to demonstrate how distracted we are, and we won't even appreciate something that we would all pay for. And to feel honored to be able to listen to such music. So then the question is, how much other such music is playing in your life? We all ask for blessings from above. We want God to bless us. Maybe the blessings are right there and you're busy with other things so you can't hear it or see it, which of course would be quite tragic. So it could pass you by even though you're right there. That's why during many of the high holiday prayers we ask the words Bakshu Panai. We ask to see your face. We want to see, we want to experience, we want to open ourselves up to see and hear sounds and music and energy that is generally invisible to us. But the only way you can do that is if you set your mind and shut down the rush hour sounds that don't let us access that voice. I've shared this a number of times. This pediatrician who used to come to the class, and he used to deliver children, babies, was part of his work. He worked in New York Hospital on York and 70th, whatever. And I don't know, at the end of one of the classes, we were just hanging around talking about people's jobs. Everyone was talking about what they do and why they do it, and why their work is special. So he was sharing why he loves his work. He says the mere fact that he could be part of this miracle called birth, give birth to children, new children in this world. And often, he said, the way he described it was very moving. He said it's the 8th floor of the New York hospital is the delivery floor. He says, so often delivering a child, it's the middle of the rush hour, and you could hear in the FDR below the honking horns and the screeching brakes and the flaring angers, the anger flaring, and people are rushing. Sometimes he's giving birth in the still of night in a very quiet moment. And he thinks to himself, look at the contrast. People are rushing to all kinds of things. Some people rushing home, to go to work, to go to a show. Most people rush just to rush. And while up here on the 8th floor, there's no bumper-to-bumper traffic. There's the mother, myself, an attending nurse. And the greatest miracle of all is happening, the beginning of life. And no camera crews, no rush hours. That contrast with a world busy with so much of its activities, and here I can participate in the miracle of miracles. It brings tears to my eyes every time I do this. It was very moving the way he described it. That night I drove home, I decided to go down the FDR. And there was a traffic jam. It was usually in the middle of the night in New York. Construction, whatever. And I try to sense, and 100% right, we all have our rush hours. So it's not like miracles aren't happening. But as the Baal Shem Tov says, the difference between a miracle and a natural event and a natural occurrence is only one small thing. Frequency. If the sun were to rise once in our lifetimes, we'd all say, wow, what a miracle. This red ball rising in the horizon. We'd come out with camera crews, bring our children. Look at the solar eclipses. But since it happens every morning, there's always tomorrow. That makes it less of a miracle. The Chacham Tzvi writes, it's just a bunch of repeated miracles that we get used to. And it's our weakness because we need a novelty. I need a rush of excitement. I need something different. Tainuk Tmidi ain't a tainuk. Ongoing pleasure is not pleasurable. So I need some novelty, something new. But in truth, as the Baal Shem Tov says, everything is a miracle, and it's seeing the extraordinary than the ordinary. But we're distracted. We have our rush hours, physically and figuratively. Our struggle for survival, our needs, our battles. And they all become tremendous veils and smokescreens and armor that block out the beautiful strings of a great symphony, which is the choreography of our real lives, God's plan for us. So comes Rosh Hashanah and says, here's a day to cut through all the smoke screens, to cut through all the layers. Let's get back to the point of the beginning, the Big Bang. How it was before we developed habits and patterns and attitudes and personality stuff and shtick of all sorts. What it is like to be a newborn child. And not just us individually, but the whole human race and the entire existence. Cosmic renewal, as the Arizal says, as the Alter Rebbe says, a new energy. And it's there for you for the taking. But one condition: if you come in as with old attitudes, how could you expect to get new openings and opportunities. Your mind is not there. Your heart's not there. Your actions are not there. You're still in your old merry-go-round game, going through your own routines. That's why the preparation for Rosh Hashanah requires stepping back. That's why we have an entire month of Elul, which is now winding down. So I know some of you will say, why didn't you tell this to me earlier? Well, I did in the beginning of Elul. But regardless, we still have a few days. Because it's like anything in life. Something chashuv, something of value, ve-chatima, needs preparation. If someone were to tell you that in a month from now, I'll get you an interview with the most important person on earth, someone that can open up all the doors for you, whether it's financial or other. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You're not going to say, you know what, okay, I have a month left, I'll figure it out the day before. You'll prepare, because it's a one-time presentation, and you'll rehearse, and you'll try and train and test it, etc. That's how Judaism looks at every special day. That's why Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, designated 30 days Kedem HaChag, which means 30 days before a holiday, to start preparing. Because it's a special day. It's a meeting. As a matter of fact, one of the words for holiday in Judaism is called moyad. Moyad means a meeting place. It's a rendezvous in time between God and us. And each holiday has its energy. Rosh Hashanah is renewal. So yeah, you can wait till the last minute and say, okay, let me be renewed. Or you can prepare yourself and say, let me get myself in a mode that when I enter, I'm ready for it. That is exactly why a holiday, even though it seems external, we dress up, special foods. You could say, what difference is it? It's a spiritual renewal. Who cares what clothing you wear? Because that's how it is. Human beings, when you feel you're dressing up, when you feel that it's a special day and you physically attune yourself to it through your garments and through your behavior and through all the beautiful things that are done in preparation for a holiday, you and your family and children and so on, that sets the tone. So obviously you can come in overalls and in your workday clothing to a Shabbos table or to a Rosh Hashanah table. But how likely is it that you're going to really appreciate it when you're still in that mode? So that's why there has to be some type of shift. And that's what these last days of the year are about. It's a shift. And the shift happens on a consciousness level. It's a shift of consciousness. And it's not as complicated as you may think. It's hard to change your life. I'm not saying it isn't. Last week I discussed it at length. But I'll tell you what's not so hard. It's not so hard to be ready for something new. You may not experience it immediately. But if you're not ready to say that it's possible, that something new can happen in my life, new energy can enter into my life, then most likely it's not going to enter. It'll happen, because Rosh Hashanah happens whether we like it or not, but it won't penetrate. It won't be internalized. So what's asked for is just open up the possibility that maybe things can shift. Maybe things can change. That's already a shift in our consciousness. You're thinking differently. And of course, hopefully it also penetrates, pierces your heart in the sense that you can also feel somewhat differently. And that's how it is. Don't ever underestimate, for example, the power of imagination, the power to dream. You could say, what difference? Imagination is not real. Dreams are not real. But imagination and dreams carry your mind to transport you to places that you may not really be there emotionally, and you're definitely not there habitually, behaviorally. But when you dream of it, you at least have introduced the concept in your life. And now the question is, can I reach there? So it's a very good beginning, what some people call the cognitive life raft, is to cognitively imagine what kind of newness you want in your life. Maybe write it down. Make it even more concrete. And don't be disturbed if you say once again, I'll never get that. How do you know? Who decided that? You've written the script? Are you ready to say that your past habits and your subjective attitudes are going to define whether things are possible or not? That's the difference between people who actually make changes or don't. Those that do not allow themselves to succumb to that voice of resignation. It said, that never happened till now, why would it happen now? So it's critical. Number one is to allow yourself that opening. Because you'd be surprised if you really dream of it, you aspire, and you believe, sometimes opportunities come you would never expect. If you don't have that opening, then you won't even see the possibility. Now, I'm not talking about being completely unrealistic and delusional. I'm talking about just simply recognizing that we are souls, and that life is a mystery, and no matter what's happened in our lives, the story is not over, and there's more to come, and embracing the unknown that we do not control, nor do we know what the future holds. This is always the signature and the mark of people who create change, who initiate change. They believe it's possible. Without that, it almost never happens, even if it is possible. And this is true across the board in every area of life. So, the mere fact that we know that Rosh Hashanah is a new beginning, like a new Big Bang, a renewal of our contract, of our mandate, of our mission statement, which we'll soon discuss a little more. That itself is a voice of hope, that you know something new is entering. It's like a new guest you're going to have in your home, in your life, for a few days. And are you going to take advantage of it and allow it to become part of your life? Or it's just going to come and go, and then back to square one. The second thing is this, going back to the mind, the heart, the brain, and so on. Once you know that the cognitive approach to something, and you have a fresh approach, and ready to hear new ideas and new attitudes, then the mind has its mysterious way of working. How much, we don't even know the role, and how much a role does it play, psyching someone up. You see this in pep talks. You see it coaches, life coaches, athletic coaches. Big part of what they do is build the confidence of their, subject, the person that they're coaching. Confidence. There's talent, and there's skill, and then there's confidence. Talent and skill without confidence will basically fall very short. As a matter of fact, some people say, if you have enough confidence, it can compensate even for less talent and skill. Because confidence is a driving force. And often you'll find that confidence is not necessarily an objective statement. When a good coach gets you to believe in yourself, you can say, is this true? But it doesn't matter, because your mind thinks it's true. And once your mind thinks it's possible, it becomes possible. You hear this about these athletes that broke, for example. There was a time where they said that the 8-minute mile or the 10-minute mile would never be broken. It was impossible. But they forgot to tell that to some of the great sprinters, that it was impossible. And they were able to do it. As soon as you say it's impossible, no one's ever done it, that's the first guaranteed way of saying, why would I even try? But then you see people who are not aware of all the obstacles, and they are able to manage. So it has a lot to do with your attitude, and that's why I would say the mind controls the rest of it. Rosh Hashanah controls the rest of it, because if you set your mind, the rest follows. And then let's address the mission statement. Since it's the renewal of our contracts, so essentially the mission of your life. And I've talked about mission statements many times. No business can function without one. How can we? Someone asks you, what's your personal mission statement? So most people either say to be happy, to make money, to bring up a healthy family. Those are the three big ones. And if you say to them, well, these don't qualify as mission statements, because it's the equivalent of saying, a company saying, our mission is to make money. Our mission is to produce happy employees. Our mission is to be efficient, to be successful. That every company should be doing that. A mission statement requires something unique and something defined that can be measured, that you can say, did you do it or didn't you do it? So most of us were never compelled, I would say all of us were never asked, not as children, not as adults, to have to answer the question, what's your mission in this world? And I'm not saying if you have the gift of gab and a good mouth, you can go on and I'm sure you can wax eloquent and pontificate how it's to help other people and to serve and to be a giver, not just a taker, and to love. I've seen people do that very well. But then, here comes the question. Very nice. So now let's look at your life and let's see what you're doing in that direction. How much of that are you really doing? And when you start looking at a person's life and their work and their home, you don't always see everything they just described. So then it's a company that has a mission and the company is not running by that mission. So this requires a lot of brutal honesty. And brutal honesty begins, that's true, no one ever told me I need a mission. So how do I run my life? Day to day. I have a plan for my career and my economic growth. I hopefully have a plan also to build a family and do some other and buy a home or move somewhere, whatever it is. But beyond that, most people have no clue. Because the real question is this. Why did God send your soul to this earth? That's the real question. To buy a new home? To be successful? That what God needed your soul to come to this earth for? A lot of people He could have sent for success. What are you and your unique personality and your soul? What mark will it leave? Now when you start thinking about it a little honestly, you come to realize, and sometimes even to tears, you know, I'm living my life, I've never asked that question really in a serious way. And even if I have, it was a passing thought and I moved on. Because life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans. And the distractions, as I mentioned, of life take over. The struggle for survival, paying bills. There's plenty to do. There's plenty of responsibilities and expectations and obligations. And they control your life. That story with the time management course. The guy's giving a time management course and he comes into the classroom with an empty aquarium and a few bags, big sacks. He says to everybody, you see this aquarium? It's empty, right? Yes. I'm going to fill it up. He opens up sack number 1 and takes out these big stones, boulders, places them inside the aquarium to the top. Is this aquarium full now? Well, most of the class say no. Some say maybe. Sack number 2, small stones. And he pours them in. And of course, they fill in all the spaces. Is it full now? More of them say yes. Some say no. Comes sack number 3, fine gravel, fine sand, which can fill the crevices that the small stones could not, the pebbles could not. Now is it full? And it fills it up till the top. The sand is, well, there's one more bag, so the smart ones say they must not be full, but even though it looks full. Well, what's bag number 4? Pitchers of water. He takes the pitchers of water and pours them into the aquarium till it spills over. And of course, water is even finer than sand. So now it's really full. Like, what could you put in now? So is it full? Everyone says yes. So what lesson do we learn here today, class? So a few of them knew it's a time management class, so they said, very simple. That as full as your day may be, you could always fill it up more. Like, you know, like these closets lately, they have these people who come a closet and they turn it into magic closet. You think it only store so much, suddenly it stores so much more. So you think you can only do that much, you can do a lot more than you think. That's, of course, the obvious lesson. But he says, no, that's not the lesson that I want to teach you today. The lesson is something far more fundamental. That if you don't get the rocks in first, the boulders in first, you're never going to get them in. If you put the water first, and then the sand, and then the little stones, there's no way you're going to get the boulders in. The boulders are the foundational values of your life. The things that are unshakable. Not the optional things in life. Everything is optional. Your job is optional. Where you live is optional. Your methods are optional. But the foundations, the stones, you don't get them in right there, then life, the details of your life will completely consume you. And you will not be able to get those foundations in. can't build a foundation once your life is filled up. Which means you must know what your priorities are. And in the context of Rosh Hashanah, the priority is, why are we here? Now I know it's a lot easier to teach children this idea than it is adults, because we adults already have a life. What do you want me to do now? Quit my job? Drop everything, all my responsibilities, and start going for a journey to figure out why I'm here? But that's not the point. The point is not to drop it. The point is to realize this question you have now the opportunity to answer. And your answer will define the rest of your life. Because should you discover this and this is your mission, then you start wondering, why am I doing all these different activities that don't live up to that mission? And how important are they? That's very, very disconcerting to think that way, because you may have to then start giving up things that you thought are so important, that frankly are not. That's why it's not an easy process. But we have to state it for the record and be brutally honest that that is the key to real growth. If you expect new changes and you're not ready to look at your own boulders, your point of departure, your beginning, your big bang, like where it all started, how do you really expect new change to happen when you're not even ready to go there? So people ask, okay, I wish something new happens in my life. But you're not ready to go to a new place. You want to continue doing what you're doing and also have new stuff in your life. It's another part of your repertoire. It doesn't work that way. As I always say, because if you think what you thought and you say what you said and you do what you did, you're going to have what you had. So comes Rosh Hashanah and opens a new door. Say, look, here's the deal. A new energy will enter into your life. That's a guarantee. What are you going to do about it? Are you ready to receive it, or you're not ready to receive it? And you can't just make a statement, yes, I'm ready. You have to do something about it. There has to be some new attitude, some new mindset, at least some new receptivity. And real new, not what you just say. I'm just saying, oh, yeah, I'm ready for everything. No one's ready for everything. It's not true. We are products of our pasts. We are sometimes shaped by our circumstances. So it's not like we're a clean slate, I'm ready for everything. Newborn children are ready for everything. Young children are ready for everything. Because they haven't yet been jaded, they haven't been shaped yet. We are defined by things. Whether it's our jobs, because as soon as someone says to you, ready for everything? Really? You're ready to drop everything you're doing? No one's asking you to do that, but I'm saying, who's ready? How could anybody make that statement? And may not even be wise. I'm not even saying it's healthy to make that statement. You have maybe healthy obligations. Not all our commitments are bad. Right? I know that came out a little strange, but means not all our obligations are unhealthy. Some of them are necessary. So no one's suggesting. But like when God told Abraham, Lech lecha, ma'artzecha, leave your land. That's a universal declaration to each one of us that to discover yourself, you have to somewhat free yourself from the forces that shape you. And they break into three categories, as I often discuss. Your subjective attitudes, parental influences, and social pressure. These are three forces that exert tremendous force, tremendous power in shaping our lives. What will people think? That's why the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, begins, Al yevish mipnei hamaligim. Stand humble, stand like nothing in front of God, Shavisi Hashem like something, and do not be disturbed by those that will mock, that will laugh, that will dismiss you. Because it's unbelievable influence, our peer pressure, social pressure. And add into the equation parental attitudes and influences that shaped us when we were in our formative years. And then our own subjectivity and blind spots. You have yourself pretty good, formidable three subjective forces that need a lot of freeing yourself of. And how do we free ourselves? We take that attitude, Lech lecha, I am ready to move. You may need a person that helps you do so, that helps you see something from a different perspective, to look at something differently. But regardless, the most important thing is to begin and be receptive to it. So there's nothing wrong with being a Rosh Hashanah, whether it's in a synagogue or on your own or whatever scenario may be, where you close your eyes, go into a secluded, into like a private little space, and maybe shed a tear or two. I don't mean fabricated. Like some people, the humor goes that in their siddur, in their machzor, in their prayer book, it says, here, start crying, Kansar Klifkes, right? It's called spontaneous tears. When the chazan comes to page 140, time to cry. Obviously that's that. I'm talking about a natural, and crying doesn't always mean sadness. Crying is awareness. You sometimes cry simply because of the beauty of something. Something just overwhelms you. So Rosh Hashanah, to be able to go back to that place, you are using the words of Likutei Torah and some other place in Hasidic discourse that say, just have compassion for your soul. Here you have a soul. It entered into your body so many years ago. All fresh, new, with a unique mission. And then it got itself trapped in life. It's being held hostage by physical desires, by survival, by patterns, routines, everything I mentioned earlier. And maybe you should just shed a tear for your soul that's trapped in this prison. That happens to open up doors, because it's awareness. It's like acknowledging. Think of a child that is trapped, God forbid, in a abusive or dysfunctional environment, and someone comes and just says, I remember you're there. That alone is already a redemption. It may not yet free the child, but at least someone remembers. Someone knows there's something in there. Tell your soul, you remember it's there. It's called Yom HaZikaron Rosh Hashanah. It's a day of remembering. So we say God should remember us for good. But that also means we remember us. Remember the God within us, the godly dimension within us, our soul. And that has unbelievable power. This is something everyone can do. You just need to create space. You can't be impatient. You can't say, I have other things to do. You have to quietly sit down and let that music play. And then that awareness already begins to open up a door. Obviously, the more of that type of attitude, the more you can expect. So that's just an example of one of many things that we can do. It's about being very honest with yourself and being able to go into deeper dimensions of your own soul and just acknowledge that it exists. And even better, if you understand those dimensions, to think about that, to meditate on that. Because at the end of the day, what do you think prayer is, especially the high holiday prayers? Prayer is a journey into the heart and soul of who you are. That's what it is. If you have my book, 60 Days, I have in the back a special prayer section. It's called, the first opening there is Beyond Lip Service. It's exactly opposite of what you see in any synagogue. In a synagogue, you go into a synagogue, maybe there's a good cantor, he's putting on a performance, everyone's listening. Obviously, that's far from prayer, that's a performance. Beautiful voice, it may even awaken something in you. Then you have other places, they praying and praying and praying, hundreds of pages, no one knows what they're saying, keeping up. This one, the brown, it's 104, and the blue, it's 150, it's a page number marathon. When indeed the Talmud says, Ezu Aveda Shebelev, what is the service of the heart? Zui Tefillah, that's prayer. It's emoting, just like sitting with someone you love and telling them, I love you. That's not said by page numbers or by rote or lip service or mechanical. It's emoting. I want to share that I love you. I want to share a warm feeling, closeness, something intimate. Prayer is intimacy with God. If you want to make it more intimacy with your soul. Because at the end of the day, the God within you is your soul, which goes hand in hand with your mission statement, your soul's mission. But if you don't have that attitude, how are you going to awaken that and ignite something there? If you go in with exactly the same attitude you had a day before, you're going to get the same results, which is the activities you're involved in, and that's that. And each of us in our own way just has to have that type of approach. You approach something new in a new way. You don't approach it in the old way. You approach something new with an old way, you know what you're doing? What they say with the bad investments? The good money follows the bad money. Your old ways suddenly then take control of your new stuff, and the new becomes part of your stale air that you had till now. It's the last thing you want. You want to have fresh air, and you want to be fresh to accept that fresh air, not to make the fresh air part of your old repertoire, your old patterns. So really, this is so much in our own hands, and what it takes is simply really applying yourself, paying attention, which is not such an easy thing to do when you have other things on your mind. You know, I once shared something like this with someone. I think it was a year ago, right before Rosh Hashanah, and while I was sharing, his cell phone begins to ring. He says, "Just a minute, let me get that." I wasn't insulted, even though I was, but not personally. But for him, I was, you know. And he says, "Okay, so what were you saying about freshness and newness? Tell me again." And I told him, "You see the example. Your phone is going to ring when you're ready for something fresh. That means you're going back to your old thing. You can't even stop yourself." No, it was a very important call, blah, 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 blah. It took me half an hour to explain to him, that's not the phone call, you idiot. It's about the attitude. I didn't say idiot, but you know. It's not the phone call. It's not. You know, explain to me there was an emergency call. I understand. How many other such emergencies do you have a day? Huh? And I don't even know if it helped, because I think he finally accepted what I said, but I don't think he really absorbed it. And I'm not trying to be critical. I'm just saying it's so hard because we come with previous frameworks and previous preconceptions. And we're always, know this is a given. You're always trying to fit new things into your previous models. You already have your shelves, and when you hear something new, you stick it on one of the shelves. That's what we naturally do. Which, of course, is so sad because it may be completely new. Why are you sticking on a shelf? Maybe you don't have a shelf for it yet. Because it's convenient that way. What do you mean? I built my shelves already. Why are you telling me I don't have? I have room on the shelf. You get that? I mean the shelf here, not in a physical sense. I mean, so you hear a new idea, you say, that's not so new. It fits into what I heard yesterday. But maybe it is new. Or at least a new perspective. Because it's the easier way, it's the lazier way. It's also the comfort zone of just fitting it in to something I already know or I already feel. Comes Rosh Hashanah and challenges us and says, here, I'm giving you something on a new platter, new energy, unprecedented. What are you going to do? You're going to fit me into what you already had till now. So then you're going to have a year that was exactly like you had last year. The new energy came and went, and you never took advantage because you decided to fit it in to what you already have in your life. It's so simple what I'm saying, but look how difficult it is to do that. What does that tell you? We all logically understand that. You know, take any area of your life where you have a real challenge, and you'd like to change something. You like something new, okay? And then let's do a imaginary exercise here. And then someone says to you, here, on this and this day, this and this night, come to this and this place, and guarantee you'll have a new approach and a new opening, a new opportunity in the area that you're looking for. Okay, you're excited, you prepare yourself, you go. But remember, you're still a human being that's sometimes a victim of your past. You enter, and you enter with an attitude that you had before, even though you're excited and anticipating. And then that person sees that your attitude is such. So even though your mind tells you, wow, this is such a new opportunity, but it's your emotional framework and your emotional makeup that traps you in your own subjective self, and even though your mind tells you you're doing everything wrong, will still do it. What do they say about this in self-help and self-healing? They have not self-help, healing. They have this analogy called the Prince of Darkness analogy. Some people call it the devil. We don't believe in a devil, the Satan, whatever you want to call it. So how does the Prince of Darkness work? It goes like this. A guy lives his entire life completely a selfish, self-indulgent person, exploiting, taking advantage of everyone and everywhere. A type of Dorian Gray type of life. And lives it up. The day comes, of course, the day of reckoning. He dies and goes up to heaven, the pearly gates, standing in front of the heavenly court, and they start listing everything he did, how exploitive he was, how manipulative, how unscrupulous, the whole list. And he has nothing to say. What is he going to say? He had a good time, but the day came, the party is over. So the court says, fine, before we pass judgment, we'll sit and deliberate, and you go out in the chambers there and wait till we call you. So he goes out into the hall, ruminating on his plight, right? And all depressed. The angel of darkness, the prince of darkness, approaches him and says, "What's going on?" He says, "I lived a very nice life. I did whatever I wanted. That was a lot of fun. But now I'm going to pay the price." So the prince of darkness says, "1 second. I have a deal for you." As always. What's the deal? You give me your soul, and in return, I'll give you another chance. I'll get them to send you back down to earth. You could do it all differently. Now this guy was a shrewd guy. He said, okay, interesting offer. But if I go back down and I don't remember of all this, I'll just do it all again. So on one condition, you send me back down, but I want the memory of everything I did, and the memory of our conversation, and memory of all the consequences. So I will know, or else I'll just repeat it. No problem, Prince of Darkness says here, sign right here. Everything you want I'm giving you. You'll have the memory. You'll always remember, and so on. And the story goes, what happens? Yes, he goes back down to earth. He's given a new chance. He's born. And he remembers everything. He remembers the conversation. He remembers the deal. Remembers the consequences. Remembers his remorse, so to speak. And what do you think happens? He does everything exactly the same way again. This is used, you'll find, a lot of the 12-step programs or different addiction programs to show the trap of when you're an addict or when you're trapped. It doesn't make a difference. Even if you remember everything, you do it again. That's the insanity of the human condition. You can know that you're doing something right now destructive, but as the Talmud puts it so brilliantly, Ein adam ever avera elim kein nichnas by ruach shtus. A person does not sin, and avera in Hebrew means displace. It means from havara rishus l'rishus. Like a mitzvah means to connect, and avera means to disconnect. A person does not disconnect. Why would anyone in their right mind disconnect from their life source? Would anyone healthy put their hand in fire deliberately? If someone does, either they don't know it's fire or they don't know fire hurts you. There's actually a law, in Jewish law, there's a din, a law that states the following. You have different types, 4 different types of so-called guardians that you hire. You either hire for pay or volunteers, let's say to protect your property or protect your merchandise or your animals or so, whatever it is, your livestock. So here's the thing. Let's say you retain someone to protect your property and your livestock. Let's say you have a farm, your animal. So they agree to do that. So they're responsible for if that animal damages something or if that animal is hurt. Because that's the whole point. That's why we hired you. That's why we, even if you're a volunteer, that's what you accepted. So, for example, the animal suddenly, in some way gets itself wounded, something that the shomer, the protector the guardian could have prevented, is responsible. But then there's a question: what about an animal that jumps into a fire? There's a fire on the side of the road. Animal's walking. Suddenly, without this, the animal jumps into the fire. I mean, it's an example for an act like that. Answer is that the guardian is not responsible because he assumed the animal was a normal animal. He didn't know the animal was insane. No animal would jump into fire. So how could he be responsible for something? Had he been told that this animal happens to be insane, you got to be careful, it'll do something that's self-destructive, it's one thing. So it requires a certain level of insanity to go and be self-destructive like that. Or a moment of blindness. So the same thing is, if someone knew, if we knew that this and this act burned you, physically or spiritually burned you, no one in their right mind would do something like that. If we knew that the entire human race were part of one organism, or as the Yerushalmi says about the Jewish people, that we're all parts of one body, would it be conceivable for the right hand to hit the left hand? Or one part of the body to turn on another, unless it's an autoimmune disease? No, because you know you're damaging yourself. Why would you hurt yourself? So how is it possible we can hurt each other? Because we don't feel we're part of one entity. We're blinded. Rosh Hashanah, it's a moment of blindness, of insanity. And that's why we're perfectly capable of knowing fully well that something is wrong and still do it. Because the moment you get so obsessed and so consumed, you get blinded. And you even know you're blinded. You even know in a moment later or the next day you regret it. But you can't control yourself. And the same thing is with patterns. So as much as we can talk about Rosh Hashanah and newness, and here you have an opportunity to go into a whole new state of mind and so on, we don't underestimate the power of the inertia, of the status quo. The past is a trap, much deeper than anyone ever knows. And the best proof of it is try to change it, and you'll see. You could change it for a day, 2 days, 3 days, very, very difficult. Because it's like almost welded in. The neurons get fired, that's how they get wired. And then it's very, very difficult to change. Doesn't mean it's impossible, but it's difficult. So then what power do we have? So firstly is to know this, not to underestimate that the status quo, the comfort zone, what I talked about earlier, the routines, the patterns. It's number one. Number two, to know that the soul has no patterns. The soul is completely free. It's only trapped within us. So when it comes Rosh Hashanah, when the orbit of our souls get closer to its source, what some write as being the Kiruv Hamoyer El Anitzutz, think of it like the orbit of the planets. There's a point in time when they get very close to their source. So what happens when a flame gets close to its source? You ever see two flames? They get close to each other. They start like kissing each other. They start reaching toward each other because they sense each other in a certain way. So same thing is with the soul. All year round the soul is on orbit, but it's somewhat concealed from its source. And as the source gets closer and more revealed, there's a tug. Now, but you have to be sensitive to that. Like anything in life, like I mentioned before, you don't hear the music if you have rush hours and kinds of turbulence that's blocking out the sounds. So what's required of us is to shut down and somewhat silence and quiet down the habits and routines that trap us. That's why you find some say that some tzaddikim, rebbes, assumed a new custom every Rosh Hashanah. They started something new. Because a new action generates new results, new reaction, action, reaction, cause and effect. You want something new in your life? Do something new. Resolve to do something new, and what happens? You'll have a new approach, a new attitude, a new response. Whether it's joining a new class, meeting a new person. So, recognizing that our old patterns are so powerful, you must do things that introduce newness into your life, or else you will not be a keli, a container, to channel in new energy. What you'll do is you'll fit the new energy into your old frameworks. That's always what happens. It's not even what we want, but that's what happens. You know, we often talk about the power of subjectivity. I always share the Chelam story. And this is just a sign of subjectivity. There's just a few other stories that are similar. The Chelam story, well, there's a few of them that capture this. but the one about the farmer on Chelim, and Chelim was a small town, and you have this whole folklore about the stupid people of Chelim. They say they were actually very smart, but the neighbors were resentful, so they created this whole Chelim lore. So this farmer on Chelim had a little farm, but it was very precious to him because he had inherited it and he knew every grain of soil, and it was his baby. One day he receives a visitor, a guest, a cousin from a very big city farm overseas, and he shows him around his little Chelim farm. They sit down to dinner, and the Chelim farmer says, "So what do you think about my farm, cousin?" Your farm. It's nice and cute, but it's so tiny. So he's taken aback, and he's like insulted. What would be so tiny? And how big is your farm back in wherever? Texas? Iowa? Kansas? Texas? Okay, Texas. Fine. I'm fine with Texas. Okay. And how big is your farm? So he says, my farm. He's trying to find a point of reference. How do you explain to us, a little klein shtetl farmer who's never seen anything but his little world here? So he says, well, it takes me all day to travel with my tractor from one end of the farm to the next. He thought that would capture the scope, all day. Thousands of acres. The Chelim farmer suddenly looks at him with compassion and empathy and says, cousin, don't feel so bad. I once had a tractor like that too. So the Chelim farmer was not making a joke. He just couldn't fathom something so large. If you ask people in a survey a question, are you narrow-minded, closed-minded, or open-minded? Are you objective or subjective? Very few people are going to mark the box, I'm closed-minded, narrow-minded, and subjective. Because part of your subjectivity makes you think you're objective, obviously. Bias blinds even the eyes of the wise. The Torah calls chachamim, tzaddikim, misal of divrei tzaddikim. They're called wise, but that's the power of bias. Everybody is blinded. Everybody has biases. And not like the guy that told me, yes, I have blind spots, but I know what they are. Like the doctor that says, I'll tell you when you need a second opinion. So, but we have to remember, we all have our farms. The Chelim farmer was not malicious. He was basically stating his perspective. He never saw a farm that size, so he hears a tractor. To travel with a tractor from one end to the other, he was convinced it was some old shmata jalopy that take all day to crank up, to move from here to there. It was definitely the vehicle. I don't like to quote this anti-Semite, Henry Ford. But when they asked him how much market research did he do when he invented the Model T, whatever it was called, that car, he said 0. They said, why didn't you do any market research? He says, because if I would have asked people, they would have told me they want a faster horse. No one would say, I want a car. No one thought about a car. Or Steve Jobs said it, that people don't know what they want. You have to tell them what they want. You have to show them something they never thought of and say, oh, wow, and now I need it. Because people can only give you answers based on their previous frameworks. They're not going to tell you, let's do it completely different. They'll say, let's do what we had before. Let's make it better. That's why so many young people and children are often the most creative of all, because they don't have any previous notions. They don't know what impossible means, and they don't know how it was done before. I don't know how it is today, but I remember in the early stages of the web, so MIT and in other universities where they were developing technologies and new web language and so on, they insisted that anyone working on so-called Web 2 can have no prior knowledge of Web 1. Anyone that was already involved in the first generation of the technology was not allowed to participate in the next stage. Because by no way that you can participate and not be tainted by previous notions. Which you'll see is always necessary whenever you need something very innovative. I was reading about some advertising agency in California, some big agency, I forgot their name. They have big clients. They have an interesting thing. When they have a serious client with a new campaign, what they do is they have a amusement park, a children's park, that they take their high-level executives to, the ones working on this campaign, for an entire day. They play in a sandlot, on swings. They go back to on seesaws. I don't even remember the names, but we all did it once, like eons ago. And that's where they spend for hours getting into this type of completely outside of their regular zone, not in an executive office, not with views, down on the ground in dirt, and they get all messy and all that. And they're painting and paintbrushes and, the whole arts and crafts. And then they have breakaway sessions, whatever they call them, breakout sessions, and they start innovating. And they get unbelievable ideas they would never get if you didn't take the people out of their comfort zones. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. There's nowhere to end. Rabbi Zera in the Talmud fasted 100 fasts, 2 different versions, how many fasts, but many fasts, to forget he was a master of the Babylonian Talmud, so he should be able to learn the Jerusalem Talmud. So, of course, the obvious question is, since when do you have to forget something to accumulate new knowledge? Since when do you have to forget old knowledge? Knowledge is accumulative. You ever hear you have to forget knowledge to remember? You have to forget ignorance. But knowledge grows upon knowledge. Since when do you have to forget something to remember? And additionally, it's actually a prohibition. You're not allowed to forget Torah. I deliberately go and fast to forget. And the answer given, which is brilliant, just tells you the answer to all of our to so much of our lives. Rabbi Zera didn't want to forget what he learned. He wanted to forget the methodology of the Bavli. Why did he want to move on? Because the Babylonian and Jerusalem academies were more or less simultaneous. The Babylon academy was a little longer, more years, but they were 2 different methods. It's not just 2 different cities. One was a method that's far more brief. You get straight to the point. The Babylonian method, Machshakim Heshivani, Talmud Bavli, was through a lot of questions and arguments and counter-arguments until you hammered it out and got to clarity. Very different method. So a man of his age, who already had a proven methodology to think, he wasn't having a problem. To have that type of will to surpass his own method, that he needed to fast. It wasn't to forget the knowledge, it was to forget the method. The Lech Lecha Ma'artzecha I mentioned earlier. All growth, all real serious growth happens with these paradigm shifts. Now sadly, in most cases they will happen through crisis or trauma or loss. Why? Because to get us out of comfort zone is extremely difficult. Unfortunately, negative things is not our choice. We don't want them. And that's exactly what they do. They crack open your resistance. The cracks is how the light gets in. If an egg didn't crack, a chick would never emerge. A butterfly coming out of a cocoon. So they have that metaphor. Well, it's actually a true story. Where someone sees the butterfly after, was it once a caterpillar, then it goes into the chrysalis, and then it begins to emerge. So someone saw the butterfly struggling to get out of the cocoon. So in his moment of compassion, takes a knife and scissors and cuts gently away the cocoon, and here the butterfly is now a beautiful monarch butterfly. Well, lo and behold, the butterfly does not fly. And as much as he prods it, it won't move. And then someone lets him know the little piece of news. That when the butterfly is struggling to get out of the cocoon, that struggle puts pressure on its wings that creates liquid in the wings that will create the proper aerodynamics for a butterfly to fly. And his so-called moment of compassion, that he tried to be compassionate to make the butterfly not struggle, that pressure never happened, so the butterfly never developed the strength to fly. Now this is not advocating, God forbid, pain, suffering. No one should know of that. But what it results in, any challenge we have, is always an opportunity to get to a new place. And whether we like it or not, often negative experiences are what catapult us in this, what I call paradigm shift. And that's exactly why, as the Arizal, as I mentioned before, the Arizal says that right before Rosh Hashanah, the whole world, the universe goes into a slumber, a cosmic sleep. It's called sometimes in Kabbalistic terminology, dormita, the zoh, whatever the dormita in Aramaic is like a sleep. Not in order to sleep, in order to die, God forbid, in order to produce new energy. And on Rosh Hashanah, especially when we blow the shofar, we draw down a chodesh, a completely new, unprecedented energy. But you can't have it if the old energy is still dominating. And that's why you need to have that type of sleep. You need to go into a withdrawal mode in order to allow something new to enter. If you're in a forward thrust and you're constantly, and you're loud and you're dominating, well, you're going to have what you had till now. So psychologically, that's exactly the same attitude we should have. It's a certain humility, silence, recognizing you want to experience really Rosh Hashanah in a new way. And let's be honest, I'm not going to put anybody on the spot, but ask people that you know that are very devout Rosh Hashanah observers and tell them, can you tell me in a few words how Rosh Hashanah last year made you into a new person and how you're different after Rosh Hashanah as before? I would challenge anyone to be able to answer that question. Now, that's not because people are bad people, because it's very, very difficult to experience newness when you're an adult. You just really, when everything new comes in, just is a matter of continuing what you had before. To have newness, you have to have the Rabbi experience. You have to be able to step back and literally ready to erase your hard drive to some extent, your attitudes, and so on. Now, I said earlier, it's not so easy to do, but it's easy to open yourself up to do it, meaning to be ready, receptive. Is it possible that something new can happen? Cynics will say no, and they'll call themselves realists. Skeptics will say no. But you know who won't? Children will never say no. And real dreamers and real soulful people will never say that's not possible. It's those of us that are trapped in our patterns and routines that will say you can't get out of it. The more things change, the more they stay the same, as I discussed last week. So here we have an opportunity, a few days left. As I said, everything chashuv, everything valuable, ve-chatima, requires preparation. You can't enter into a new zone without any shift inside of you and expect that it will all just suddenly change you. You enter in a fresh way, then you can expect fresh results. You come in with an old attitude to a new place, very unlikely that the new space or the new place is going to have much effect on you, because you're going to fit it right into your old framework and your old molds. I can tell you this from personal experience. The many years that I spent sitting at the feet of my Rebbe teacher, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So many of you know, one of the things in my claim to fame, one of them is being able to remember hours and hours of the talks he delivered on Shabbat and holidays when no recorders were used and no notes were taken. Something probably doesn't exist on earth today, because why would anyone do that? Today we have machines, we have technology, we could write notes. Why would anyone do that? But that's what we did. And that was actually what Jews did for 1,000 years, from Moses till the Rabbi HaKadosh, when they documented the Talmud. Tarish Shabbat Peh, oral, memorize. But I could tell you how it changed my life. Because it's one of the most difficult things to do, is to hear an idea that you like and enjoy and understand, and still focus not on your processing of the information, but absorbing another's ideas. As I've discussed a number of times, listening is an art. It's not so easy to listen, because we have two wheels in our mind. One is a processor and one is an absorber. Children don't have a processor yet, or a developed processor. Children don't have preconceived notions. They don't have ideas. They don't have a framework. They don't have a methodology. They have nothing. They have a brain, a clean slate, a dry sponge. What absorbs? A dry sponge absorbs. A saturated sponge, a wet one, doesn't absorb much. And as we grow older, our sponges get wetter and wetter, our minds get wetter and wetter, with maybe great ideas. But that's as much as it's your great ideas, and that's it. It's been saturated. Try teaching a new language. Not a new language. Try teaching ABC to an adult. Who would have patience to sit in a class where they keep repeating Kametz Aleph Ah or A, B, C, D? Who, we're adults with big minds. Who has patience for this? But children don't ask such questions. They can repeat it again and again and again. I always find it fascinating. How come they like just rebel? I say, what is this repetition of these stupid sounds that don't mean anything? And they don't know that these are the words, that letters that will make up words, and words will make up ideas, etc., etc. So to go back when you're an adult with a mind and shut down your processor to be able to retain what another person says without your preconceived notion is not an easy thing to do. That's what we had to do. And a direct proportion of your ability to do that is your ability to remember. Direct proportion, no question. The smarter you are and the more you're processing information, the less you'll remember what another person tells you. That's why you see smart people are not good listeners usually. Unless they reach that place where they recognize that this first sign of intelligence, ROSH HASHANA, Yiras Hashem. The Talmud does not begin on page 1, it begins on page 2. Page 1 is blank. Because you always know the first sign of wisdom is that you are ready to receive. You're not the smartest. Your Talmud Chacham is the great compliment, the student of a wise person. A Chacham actually in Judaism is almost like a smart aleck. A Chacham from Anashtan, he just thinks he's a smart guy. Talmud Chacham is the ultimate compliment. You ever think about that? Talmud Chacham means a student of wisdom, or a student of a wise one. Because the real wise one always knows he's a student, always knows he's absorbing something greater. The professor that wrote that paper, his lifetime achievement, his magnum opus, and he presents it to the wizards of the world, and they come back and unanimously say that we all agreed on one thing: your paper is both good and original. And he's so moved because, wow, he has such type of peer acknowledgement. But then his heart sinks when the guy says, but there's one problem. We also all agreed that the part that's good is not original, and the part that's original is not good. Because real ideas are not original. I always say this. I think I write it in my book as well, Toward a Meaningful Life. The greatest compliment you can get from someone is they tell you, I didn't hear anything new from you. It was always there, I just didn't have the words for it. That's called resonance. When you hear a song that touches you, it's not about the innovative song. It means the power of it is that it touched you. It's saying it gave you a voice and articulated something you couldn't find words for, or sentiment you didn't find expression for. Because that's what real truth. Truth is not owned by anybody, and truth cannot be purchased or acquired. Truth is a reality within each one of us that may not yet have expression. And then when you hear it, it resonates. It says, oh wow, that rings true. That sounds right. It's exactly how I experienced it, or something of that nature. Every person in their mother's womb is taught the entire Torah, and they were made to forget, which is why we have a cleft over our lip, upper lip. It's like the shh of the angel that makes us silences all that wisdom. So of course the question is asked, what's the point of teaching Torah and then make someone to forget? The answer is you don't really forget. You forget, the conscious mind forgets, but the superconscious remembers. And when you learn it later, it's like resonates, that's a truth that I relate to. Studies show today, for example, that children in the womb respond to music. They actually will change, they will move to music. In the womb, not just newborns. So everyone's wondering, they don't know how they can explain this. Even language is more or less a miracle, that a child by 2-3 years old, remember, it's not just mimicking the sounds of his parents, it actually can speak. So the Kabbalah and Hasidic thought talks a lot about Asiyas B'nefesh, that everyone has letters, and just a matter of later emerging. But song, how does a child know in a mother's womb to respond to music? It never heard music before. So they don't yet have an answer for it, but I can tell you what the mystics say. Because music is the language of the soul. A soul absolutely knows only music. The Baal Tanya puts it this way, called Bali Ashir, Nechnasim V'Shir, V'Yetzim V'Shir, and he translates it as follows, that every soul, for it to travel, soul transportation, requires a song. That's why there were 15 steps in the Beis HaMikdash that corresponded to the 15 Shir HaMailas. What does it mean, Shir HaMailas? Moses composed 15 steps of ascent. Mailas are steps, because you cannot climb without a song. In the physical world, we move around with our legs, with all kinds of vehicles, but a soul can only move with a song. So soul's language is song, Zmiris. The Ragat Shavagon, a great sage and scholar in the last generation, says something pretty fascinating. He says, had there not been the Chet HaEgel, had they not built the golden calf, worshipped the golden calf, all the Jews would have been Mesherim, would have been singers. Not just Levi, not just the tribe of Levi, who then became the composers. Why? Because they would all know the Taimei Torah. Torah has song to it. But that became concealed. So now we read the Torah and it's words. But the words really are music, Smiris. Even though King David was punished for calling it song, but there's a certain song within the Torah. So it's like someone giving you a speech. Most of us don't like speeches. We don't like to be preached to. But let's say you heard a song. Imagine someone singing to you. It's a very different attitude. So these are the resonating truths of our soul. And when you're able to access that, that's where you're able to experience newness. That's why song is so vital in the process of prayer. One of the names for prayer is Zimra, is song, Shira, all prayer. So it's not just words, it's actually a song. But because of the golden calf, he says, that secret was hidden from most people. So now we read words and we're trying to find the music in it. I mentioned last week the wings. So now you read the Torah and it could be just sound like words, it could be dry. If we heard the music, we'd have a different attitude. Music is resonating, music is uplifting. It transports you. So it comes down to this, that we shift whatever is possible to shift in our minds, in our hearts, and our actions, basically cognitive, emotional, and cognitive conditioning. In direct proportion to that, you'll experience some of the newness of Rosh Hashanah. And unless you do that, most likely nothing will change, as it hasn't happened in previous years. I'm not saying that as a, God forbid, as a threat or a curse. On the contrary, I wish everything changes without any effort. But it usually doesn't work that way. It requires that type of, those type of shifts. And the shift begins really your own honest appraisal and accountability. Nobody can do it for you. You know, we say in Shema every day, several times a day, V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha, b'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha, b'chol meidecha. Which means to love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your heart, and with all your ma'idcha. An interesting word. Could be translated might. Ma'id means very. When you say tov ma'od, very good. Ma'id, even double good. So ma'idcha would means with your all, beyond your all. The Talmud says ma'id is ma'moincha, your money. It's another discussion. But how's it in the context? If you think about it, it's a tremendous and simple formula. Levavcha is an emotional with your heart. You know, you love someone with your heart. The Talmud says, why does it say levavcha, not libcha? You know, libcha is your heart, because the heart has two sides to it. Yetzer tov, yetzer hara, b'shnei yetzerecha. To love with your left and ventricle and right, which means both with your good inclination and with your negative inclination. Which means even the animal soul in some way. Then you have b'chol nafshecha, which is more than love and heart. It's your spirit, your soul. But b'chol ma'idcha says, with all your might, with all your all, to give it one more step beyond what you think you're capable of. And the word is ma'idcha, your ma'id. So for you, what is beyond your regular capability may not be what's beyond mine or beyond another person's. It's all relative. As the Talmud says, a very interesting statement, and elaborated on in chapter 15 in Tanya. It says the following, that if a person, in the time of the Talmud, there was a custom that when they studied, whatever they studied, the text, they would review 100 times. 100 times. And the Talmud says that someone, Pirkei, Shena Pirkei Me'epamim, someone who studies the text 100 times, Lo Yavoda, it's considered like he did not serve God. What does an Eved Elokim, Eved mean? Someone who served? 101. He goes one more time, one more than the regular. 100 times to study something and it's still not called serving? Yeah, because that was the custom then. That was the comfort zone. That was the routine. Today the routine may not be 100, it may be 5, maybe 1. So it's about a shift in your routine is the key to something new. You give so much and so much charity, a drop more. They say till it hurts. Any crack in any shift in your comfort zone is what opens up doors. And in some places it says, B'chol mo'etcha, when you do your little shift, even though it may be relative only to you, that opens up the mo'ed amiti, the true, expansive, infinite channels for all blessings. Because it's not quantity, it's quality. For one person to make that extra effort, that for another person would be easy to do, opens up tremendous doors. And each of us have our mo'edcha. Everybody has it. And so that requires a serious commitment to do it. Because you're going to say to yourself, what's the big thing? I'll just do what I've done yesterday. Okay, so then you'll have results of what you had yesterday too. You want something fresh, new, so shift something. And it could be in any area. It could be in study, it could be in prayer, it could be in charity, it could be in helping others, whatever it may be. And you make that resolution now and you start it, I guarantee you Rosh Hashanah will be different. And you let me know next week whether I was right. Money back guarantee. So, my friends, being that we're now in the last few days before the new year, and as I said, New Year is not just a new year, it's a fresh year, it's a new energy. Hashem should bless and God should bless you all, us all, entire Jewish nation, the entire world. The year of peace, real peace, and the year of abundance. Begashmis, beruchnis, materially, spiritually. Bebona chaya mezena, which is with children. Chaya is life and health, and mezena is parnasa, livelihood. As I said, all in abundance, and everything that you feel you need, and above all the things that you don't know you need, but God knows you need. And we should all celebrate only joyous occasions. It should be a year of redemption individually and collectively. And of course, I don't even want to say a year of no pain. Obviously, if it's a year of joy, that will compensate for that. And we should only see each other on good occasions. It should be, as I said, a very blessed year. Thank you very much. It's an honor, as I always say, now it's a good opportunity, end of the year, to travel with you, soul, kindred spirits. Soul travel, we've intersected and we travel together. So it's an honor to all of you here and all of you listening. And I hope that you'll learn from me as much as I learn from you. Okay. Shana Tova and Ksiva V'chsima Tov. Thank you.